Yeah, a limitation of the for each loop is we do not have indexes. A for each loop will not allow us to have an index knowing which number of the item we're looking at. That's just the limitation of for each. But the good news is that in practical programming, it's not required much. Alrighty, so are there any questions about what we have with our for each loop? It's a simple construct, well, it's a complex construct that we can use very simply, and it lets us write code quicker. Somebody did actually bring up something I completely forgot to talk about. Can anybody tell me what the result of this program is, or specifically this line of code? Come on, does anyone want to guess what's going to happen when I run this code? We get an infinite loop. That's a good answer. Does anybody else want to chime in? We get another infinite loop, and we get an overwrite, and somebody got it. 2 people got it. We got a runtime error called an exception. When you're inside of a for each loop, you may not modify the collection you're looping over. If you want to modify the collection you're looping over, you should use a for loop. Otherwise, you will get an error saying collection was modified, enumeration operation may not execute. There are very specific reasons for this limitation, but it starts to get into the mechanics of a for each loop. Is that just for each loops? Yes. Only for each loops will throw a runtime error if you try to add something to it. So for example, I could do this in my for loop right here. I could say names.add another one, hit F5, and what do we get? Like everybody was saying before, we get an infinite loop, because every time we run the loop, we add a new item to the list, and then the list never ends, so we get an infinite loop. But with for each loops in particular, it'll throw an exception.